this is a meeting, a small meeting of the RJI's Global Advisory Council. And today we're going to give reports about our countries with in response to COVID-19, but other issues as well. So go ahead, Jonathan. You want to start?
Yeah, as I said, first of all, good day to you and to Polo. It's good to be with you again. It's always great. Looking forward to be connected to everybody. And I sense how my team becomes excited when I share with them also here in South Africa when we spoke across the world about restorative justice and all the challenges that different countries face. But what was very interesting for me in terms of the challenge in America with the killing of this gentleman.
Yeah, George Floyd.
Yes, I just saw it on the social media, and I also responded and actually just made a statement of evil police. And then I got a message from someone that I know from the States for many years, and regular also support me financially with restorative justice and that. And then he challenged me about my statement, and he said that my country is not better, and who am I to challenge their country's police? And then I had a conversation with him, and then he later even said to me, "Oh, it seems to me that you're getting puffed up here." And I said, "Well, the statements that you made, I can say the same from you, but I'm happy that we could have this conversation. So I never saw this side of you, and so on." And then at the end of the day, he said to me, "Well, you South Africans just listen to us Americans when you get money out of us." And I said, "Wow." And I said, "Please promise me that you won't even send me a dime. I want nothing from you. I will still listen to you as a person. But if this is about money, then I'm very sad that I just express what I saw, the brutality, and your response is like this." And I came to realize as I was reading different people's statements, it is not easy to make statements on social media, especially when people become very sensitive about their country and nervous about other people that stand up for justice. It was just challenging. Yeah. It was very challenging that I realized that, wow, do I have to hear something like this because of that statement? So at least I know what kind of caliber the person is if you get to the wrong side of them. But yeah. I said to him, he must not even send me one dime, $1 for anything, because I can't keep quiet, and this for the sake of money.
Right. Well, let me just say, I guess we're not going to get the others on this call unless they jump on late, but let me just put this out because I think you both know this. So in 2016, RJI convened a global committee on restorative policing. And it was directed by Dr. Paul McCold, who's in Oakland, California. He was on our council for a while, and he's retired, but he convened it, and it was a very research-focused type committee, and it had Terry O'Connell and others from around the world, and we were studying restorative policing. And Terry O'Connell, as you know, is a former police officer, and he really is a restorative justice pioneer. So from that committee, and it was over 6 months, they put together a white paper, which is on our website still. And then after the white paper, we did a webinar with Terry and Paul and myself. And so from it, you know, at the time and still, you know, it's rather new concept, restorative policing, but yet it isn't. It's about respect, mutual
Mhm.
respect between law enforcement and the community, and it's about
Mhm.
a culture change in
Mhm.
police departments. It's an emphasis on whenever citizens confront the police and police confront a citizen, it's about de-escalating any possibility of violence when tension is high, and if someone is going to be arrested, it's to make sure that it doesn't get out of control, which is exactly what happened in Minneapolis. It got out of control. It was a low-level offense. If you're aware, the man was a suspect of passing a fake $20 bill, and look what happened. So that's what restorative policing is about, and the white paper goes into great detail about it. But you know what? It's applying restorative justice principles to policing.
Mhm.
Right. So Paulo, do you have comments?
Yeah, I'm just, you know, we in Brazil are having our own problems right now. Uh,
Mhm.
we have problems with the violence escalating here, but in issues of politics, the pros and the cons, Bolsonaro supporters and the contrary people. So it's becoming a really bad stuff. And the last week we have some riots, some problems, some confrontation between the two sides for the first time openly. I'm really
Mhm.
aware that at this weekend we can see it again. So we were facing some really bad time with the COVID. Um, we're having so many deaths and etc. So I'm just following this problem by seeing on television, etc. But I have to be honest, I haven't put so much thought on that because we have some serious troubles here. But from what I see, I see two sides of this. One side of this is, let me tell you a story to uh, maybe it became more clear. In 2017, I believe,
Mhm.
I was asked to run a process because the police had killed 10 people, a slaughter, and people who are landless people, okay, in the north of Brazil, in the very problematic area on this subject.
Mhm.
So I went there to give support to a family who had lost seven of his of them was killed. Between those 10, seven was from the same family. So I went to this small city, very problematic area. I was really afraid to be there because the policeman who killed them was had been released for the previous week. So it's a really big, really small town and a very problematic area. So what did we had to we heard from them? And one of these persons was killed, had killed a security guard from a farm. So the police went there to arrest this man. They had all the documentation to make arrestment. So they went there, but what they tell, four or five of those policemen had been paid for this landlord to kill all of them,
Have
not to
been
arrest,
paid?
to, to kill them, to kill everyone, not to
Wow.
arrest them.
Huh,
But there are
Wow.
more than 30 policemen in this action. So
I'm sure.
the other 25 or more never know about it. When they get there, these four or five policemen who had this intention to kill everyone made some arrangements so they all the policemen go through from here from there so they were sent very away from where those people are. So there's the 4 or 5 policemen went there and killed everyone, but
Mm.
10 people were killed. Was killed, but the 30 and or more policemen was arrested at the same for the same crime, as every one of them was guilty of that. So that's what I think about it. There's some bad people, some bad policemen, some bad professionals who has to be accountable for that, but not everyone. So what happened is when you say to, let's say that to the other side, you said all of you are this or that, you got this tension will be escalating, you know. I guess what we have to do as in the restorative justice field is try to de-escalate this violence, to separate the persons who did the bad actions and to be accountable, to be to make to pay for that, you know, even between the even in the court, etc.
That's
So
right.
but you have to be very aware of not saying, oh, the police is, oh, the black man is, or the women is, or the man is. Sometimes I saw that, I see that happening. So when we did that kind of stuff, we became we create even more violence, even more the problem gets bigger. So for the big picture, Lisa and Jonathan, that's my point of view. I guess
Mhm.
we can, we could help them to talk to each other, to every side, to know who's have they, what who that have the same needs, the same intentions, the same good intentions, and
Mhm.
for those who had so bad intentions, for the races, for the violence, yet and etc., they have to be uh, separated from the people who are not doesn't have that perspective. We saw that very clearly in the last Sunday here in Brazil,
Mhm.
when there are two sides at the street, no problem. Then one guy with a flag, they're allegedly neo-Nazist flag, was went to confront the other side, and 4 or 5 guys from the other side went to beat him. So there was thousands of people there, and less than 10 people created all the riot, and then nobody can hold this anymore. So
Mhm.
I guess what we should really do is try to avoid to do that kind of statement. These people or this profession, whatever, always are this or that. You know, for that, I'm always I'm always on, and I believe in that sense we can really good some we really do some good stuff. That's my main concern, to not say
Mhm.
these people, this profession, these guys are these or that.
Right.
There are
Right.
Yeah.
bad people, good people everywhere. You
Right. And
know.
Yeah.
let me make a comment about that. And there's so many issues here, and you both bring so much to the table. Um, that's what RJI is trying to do and has tried to do on issues of racial violence and police accountability, let's say. Or, you know, lately we're talking here in the United States, we're talking about police brutality. But what I've noticed is that, let's just give me an example. So you know that we've endorsed, I think 3-4 candidates for district attorney. So they're running
Yeah.
for prosecutors, and most of them, well, actually one's in Michigan, and then 3 in New York. But they have all responded to the death of George Floyd, and I immediately sent them the white paper on restorative policing so that they knew that when they're making comments, there is something like this. Now, most of those candidates are new to restorative justice. They're learning. but one of the candidates, Mimi Roca from Westchester, New York, was very excited to see it. And she said online, this is really key. And I thought, yes, it is. And you know, when it came out in 2016, it got a little traction at the time. But then after our election here, and you know who was elected in 2016, it kind of disappeared. And so we didn't have a lot of room to push it harder. And we just had to let it kind of go. But now here we are again. I think we need to look at the paper, look at the webinar, and have some other conversations, webinars, and so forth, conversations like this, because like you said, Paulo, it's not about saying all law enforcement is bad. We're not saying that. But what we are saying, yes, there are, as everyone always says, well, there are a few bad apples. But it's not just that. It's more than that. We know that. If that were the case, you remove the bad apples and we'd be okay, not just in the U.S., but around the world, right? But as you just pointed out, there are places where there's corruption. There's places where there's corruption in police unions, police associations that represent the police. And also, let me give you an example. So if you remember this case of George Floyd, he died because of what's called a carotid restraint. So that's when the knee is placed on the neck. It's called a carotid restraint. And I did a little research about that because the question is, are any law enforcement officers being trained to respond to crime in their communities where they're allowed to use certain types of restraints that kill?
Let me say one stuff. That's precisely the point. When I talk about that with Terry O'Connell, what he says, what is the main work there he's trying to do for more than 30 years now,
right,
to work with the new police officers. And for those who are police officers for 20, 30 years, it will be very hard for them to change their mind of how to be a police officer. But to include in the preparation of the new police officers these subjects, this matter, human rights, restorative justice, in this kind of thing, but not just theoretically, but helping them how to put it in the word, you know. So that's precise. It takes time. It we'll see what happened in 10 or 20 or 30 years. It takes time, but you have to do both. Work with those who are already had this idea of how to be a police officer, who has to be very aggressive and etc. But to work with the new ones, to find between those who was there, to think differently how they can be a police officer and keep the order and keep the security, but do it in the most non-violent way.
right.
That,
Right.
so
But remember too, let me add, and then we'll hear from Jonathan. Remember, so in the cases of misconduct, and what we've just seen is more than misconduct, it's a death. And it was not just one officer, there were 3 officers watching and did not stop it as it was being filmed. And so then what happens, you know, in our criminal justice system, then you have a prosecution. So that's when the district attorneys step in, like the ones that we've endorsed, or attorney general, and then they have to move it into the courts, because then it has to be proven that that the act was committed intentionally, that the officer intended to kill that suspect. So then it gets real murky because it's politics. So it's not just training of the officers. And remember too, well, you know, it's politics. It's like, so we know police departments don't exist in and of themselves. They don't create their own policies and procedures. It comes down from the mayor. It comes down from politicians above them, right? There's tacit support for their responses sometimes. So Jonathan, what are your thoughts about this? And bring in race. race.
Well,
and race.
I just want to ask you. You mentioned about the restraining. What is the word that you use? What kind of
Yeah,
restraint?
it's referred to. It's you. I guess there are a lot of words that are used, but it's carotid. So that's the vein in the neck, the carotid vein. So when the knee is placed on the neck, George Floyd died of asphyxiation due to the pressure on the neck from the knee.
Use a technique to hold the guy, but they go so very far away from what they have to
That's
do.
right. And in his case, what I've studied about his case in the video is that he was already handcuffed. And so when he was handcuffed, and they say, in essence, I think they would say he was resisting arrest, but he was handcuffed and he had fallen outside the squad car. So, but it was unnecessary force. And then the question of he was held down for 8 minutes in that position, which is why he died. And so obviously, as we would say, that's not restorative policing. I mean, that was unnecessary and that was brutal. So
but Lisa, also thank you for that. It's very interesting to hear that kind of restraining, but I think they went overboard with that, and that caused the death of him, which is very sad. And so there are so many people that are very sensitive about this, especially, if I can use this word, if you are on the conservative white side of America, and you get all this kind of racial blames, and because it's a black person and all that, and so on. And obviously people become sensitive about this. This is what my personal experience was in terms of just my statement that I made on social media. But there is one thing that I can say, that many challenges within police in different countries, there is a huge amount of racial challenges, where a certain race will treat an opposite race completely different when it comes to arrest. If I think of the apartheid years in South Africa, how the white police was arresting our people brutally, and even at that stage there was nothing like police female that arrest females. It was just they just arrest anybody. And how people were arrested, even if you walked in the streets of white areas, just the way they will stop at you and arrest you and even smack you before you can answer them. So that happened there. In now in the new democracy of South Africa, I don't think it changed that much, because the way even police is still handled, sometimes their own people, and when people in the same race challenge, or the way they arrest brutally their own race group as well, then you also realize how much bitterness and anger is within themselves that they never worked through, and they can't handle the challenges of people. That's why their arrest is so brutal. And then if it comes to other racial groups, then you can also pick up from the police that there is, in the conversation with the police and the potential person to be arrested or questioned, there is racial tension. It's coming up. It's coming up. So I believe that police authorities need to teach their people more about dealing with their own anger when they deal with people, because when you arrest people,
well,
you
we got one
sometimes
more coming in. Hold on one second. Let me get up, Nate.
Perfect, Jonathan. That's the point. They have to learn how to deal with their anger, their disappointments, their flaws, etc.
Yeah, because you know, if you're gonna arrest. Hi, Apni, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Well, good to see you again.
We're talking about policing, Nate.
Good evening. Sorry, I got late the form, and we've had some minor power hiccups.
I understand. Welcome. Okay, Jonathan, and we're talking
Please
about policing.
let me just finish in a few seconds and so on. That I can just say that because when you are in a position or when you apply to be part of the police system, you know that you're going to deal with difficult people. You're going to deal with people whose behavior is unacceptable. That's why they got involved in crime and gangs. So you know what you're going to face when you get involved in police. And I feel the police need more training other than military training and the way they try to protect themselves. But when it comes to these little challenges, then they go overboard with not dealing with their own anger that they don't even realize at the time. But this guy is already handcuffed. Why must I still do this? Because I've got no reason for that.
Right, exactly.
And this is things that police authorities need to be aware of.
Right, and let me just give you this background about myself. So in the 1980s in California, I was active with a civil rights organization. And that civil rights organization was a small nonprofit. We didn't have any money, but our focus was to respond to racial violence in Northern California. This is in the 80s. And the Klan was active in our community, and so was the neo-Nazi party. This is in the 1980s. And in fact, I was at a demonstration where the Klan had a big demonstration in front of the state capitol in Sacramento. I was standing there, and I realized, I know this is a sidebar comment, but I realized when I was at that protest that my anger was really heightened. I mean, I realized that as much as they hated Black people and others, I was hating them at that moment as I stood there. And they had horses out on patrol, police officers, and we had a cordon across between the Klan, who were wearing robes, and us on the other side. And so anyway, at that moment, I mean, I was committed to civil rights and human rights. I realized, well, this isn't good, because because my own emotions, you know, it brought me to a point of hating them. And I thought later, especially since I got into restorative justice, I thought, what we need to do is put our energies into restorative justice to try to build dialogue instead of just responding hate on hate, right? But you know, when I talk to my friends around this country and even others like you around the world about training and restorative policing, there's an incredible weariness. And you read about it today in our papers and on the media. There's just a weariness of saying, we've done this before, we've had this, we've had these dialogues, we've had enough of this. And the frustration, as you know, is through the roof. And it's because people keep dying. And, you know, I mean, so RJI has spoken out over the years when these occurrences of racial acts have occurred. There was one that I just posted of a man who was killed in Sacramento, my hometown at one time. And if you remember, his name was Stephen Clark. And he was a young Black man. He was running at night somehow got into his grandmother's backyard, and the cops were called because they thought he was up to no good, and they shot him 20 times. 20 times. And he was a suspect. So again, you know, it always makes me feel like we got to respond, and we have to point out that it's wrong, and then we have to address how to make it right. But the training is one piece, but obviously racial hatred, racial violence runs deep, as we know here. Yeah. So comments or response?
Can I say something? Okay, I believe we could act on both sides. We can put out a white paper on that. Okay, be clear about the position about those stuff, the police violence and etc. Suggesting they could develop even more their training, not just to be a military training, but they be aware to recognize their own needs and emotions. As Jonathan said, they have to be more capable to recognize the person they are acting in, etc. And we should, I believe that we should do another thing. We can offer some safe spaces for dialogue. We can use Zoom or another. I believe Zoom is the better platform, and offer a safe space for an open dialogue, a non-defensive dialogue and a non-offensive dialogue. Just to invite people from everywhere who wants to talk about it, to get their feelings, their emotions, their needs recognized, to we really want to help to stop this for forever, for good. That's what be a really amazing thing that we should do, that we can do easily, just to invite people, open this dialogue space. And for that matter, just to finish that, I've been doing a lot here in Brazil. As you know, I've did it in Spanish too. We can do it in English with no problem. We can do it not just in the States,
Yes,
United
definitely.
States. We can do it worldwide.
Absolutely.
And there's one just thing that's very, very important. We should begin, if you're willing to do that, I'm available to do that, with small groups, groups of tops 8 people and 2 facilitators of this meeting. That's we have a very large group. It will be very difficult to lead it, to prevent it to escalate some problems. So small groups, I have done it a lot here in Brazil. I'm doing that, and it's working for the wonderfully. I'm thinking of do it in the political sense, trying
Right.
to get together people who are against Bolsonaro and are Bolsonaro supporters, to just talk about the country, our needs, our problems, and not just one person or Lula or Bolsonaro, etc. Talk about the people. I believe that we should do those 2 stuffs: the white paper, trying to change some laws, the training that they receive, and etc., and this open space for dialogue.
Yes, very good. Very good. And Upneat, let me bring you up to date. So we've just been talking about George Floyd and then police law enforcement problems, in the U.S., but also globally. And then what I had mentioned earlier was what you saw on Facebook. I reminded everyone that RJI had issued a white paper in 2016. And I don't think any of you were on, Jonathan might have been on the council at the time, but it's pretty good because it was a product of an international committee. And it was something called the Delphi process, which is an academic process of the way you pull together a white paper on the subject. But Terry O'Connell, who was a pioneer in restorative justice and law enforcement, was critical. And then Paul McCold in Oakland, California. And then there was Nicola Preston from IIRP, and Carrie Clamp, who's another pioneer. She's in Australia, I believe. But anyway, it was very good. I kind of wasn't involved. I was kind of watching it. I let people just go and the academics do their thing. But that was good. And then afterwards, I moderated a webinar with Terry and Paul. And it was about an hour and a half. It was very long. It's up on the site, and so is the white paper. So we have a foundation, because in essence, it talks about what does restorative policing look like? How do you make it a reality? What are the values of restorative policing, and how do you move it into our systems? And it's not US, it's global. So yeah, Upneat, your comments about all of this.
I mean, yes, the killing itself and the reaction and response is something that makes you realize that universally across different countries, policing practices and the coercive use of power by the police is something that seems to be common. And In India, I mean, I've seen human rights violations by the police, and I've done a study also on the use of torture. So here the pressure would be on performing, in the investigation bit of it. And during this lockdown, we've had both the good bit in terms of police helping the migrants, and also in terms of trashing and making them, just forgetting about the dignity of the poor people. And the caste system is akin to your racial disparities. The lower caste and the scheduled caste, they are at the receiving end as such. And the suggestion given in terms of an open, in terms of a white paper and in terms of a webinar, I think that's fantastic, that's good. It was also occurring to my mind that we could have a webinar, a Zoom meet with some of the police officers also.
Yes,
And they would be really interested. You all are talking to them. So I've circulated the restorative policing to some of the police officers out here. And it would help them to understand, that it is possible. There's a lot of skepticism that this will not work.
Yes.
That this will not work, that is time consuming because we are short of time and we have lack of resources and people, etc. So all those concerns, and you have your wide range of country experiences across board. And I think you've done the restorative policing paper together. So that would be something that could help in, you need to trickle it down and you need to keep reinforcing. And maybe just one step at a time, some bits of it, and people talking about, I think the spaces are really essential for people to express their emotions, their insecurities, their anger, and for them to be able to understand that, yes, there are people who are willing to listen to our narratives. The narratives that people have to say in terms of what they've undergone and what they are feeling. That becomes extremely important, because I think the riots and all those we find are also out here, that when do they happen? When nobody listens to them.
That's right, yes.
And so that's important that they get heard. And I think, of course, the police in some ways also is responding. So you have to have, we have to keep reinforcing to the police. I recall, we've done this training on human rights policing for them with the peace model of the UK, where we say, you have to look at your actions, whether they are lawful, whether the force used is proportionate or not proportionate, and how do you make those decisions? So that is something that needs to be constantly ingrained into them, because somewhere or the other, there will be some leader who will say that, no, this only force works. I think that is something that the police thinks that only like we say, there's a typical phrase in India, we use danda, that means the baton, that works. The police think that only works.
Right.
So that is something that, forceful speakers and all of you experts, if you are able to, and it's always the leadership at the top also, which plays a very important role in bringing about attitudinal changes.
That's right. I always say it's from the top and the bottom up and top down.
Also.
It has to be both.
Yeah, so it's both ways, because if they want to do that, and then we encourage those persons, the ones who are doing at the bottom, the good practices who are helping. In my city, I have in fact quite a few women police officers who've been, I've been working with them, who've been helping feed the migrants from their own income, from their own salary. So we need to, we need to encourage this aspect of policing also, that this is the humane side, which is not just law enforcement, but which is reaching out to one human being to another human being.
Right, and let me point this out too. And I said this earlier. I think, while we encourage and instruct about restorative policing, and like Paulo said, create safe spaces to speak and to have dialogue, which is a great idea, and even that phrase. We have to point out when wrong has been done, and like I mentioned, the use of the carotid restraint, which is, by the way, really a chokehold, Jonathan, a chokehold. But that tactic that was used by the police officer in Minneapolis and caused the death of George Floyd, we have to point that out explicitly, that needs to stop. I found out that after the death of George Floyd, that in San Francisco, the same tool had been used against a juvenile in San Francisco for a low-level offense. The same tactic. So that means the question is, if we're going to take positions on restorative policing, we have to call out where they're doing it wrong and what they're doing, and then it needs to stop. Because I think we have to, that's a political position to take, and it's an important one, because we have to say that's not restorative policing. What does restorative policing look like, and how can you respond to reduce crime and to lower tensions when someone is a suspect of a crime? So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I just want to read you something here that is very interesting that was on our news recently. It's being said that in South Africa, the outrage at killings by the law enforcement seems to have been a short lifespan, as many wealthier people in South Africa are able to overlook the incidents and move on with their lives and these tragedies, and they don't care about any poor people. And that is why also the police is getting away with these brutalities. What I would notice now in the USA with George Floyd is there is a number of people from all different race groups that are against that brutality, which will let the government actually get their acts in order in terms of their police brutality. But then you also have, unfortunately, someone like Donald Trump that using the Bible again for some reason. And I mean, I think one of the things that Donald Trump already knows that because of the vulnerability of the Christians is just for him to have a Bible or speak about God, and then he's got all their support.
Yes, astounding. Yes, and we were concerned, I'm sure you were, the fact that if you looked at our politics, just like Bolsonaro, when George Floyd was killed, our president said nothing about the actual case.
Yeah.
So he did not offer any words of condolence or concern or surprise or anything, right? I mean, he just pivoted from the situation. So, you know, just like you, Paulo, we have the political reality, and as you said, if we are trying to also create safe spaces to speak, we can certainly reach out to those who we don't usually work with. And I'm more than willing to do that with key people if they're willing to have a conversation and have it publicly like this on Zoom, and have that conversation and hear them and record it and have that conversation, right? But it's complicated, isn't it? Because we're talking about policing and we're talking about race, and they're both explosive, aren't they?
The strategy here is not talk about openly about that. It's talk about needs and emotions and the feelings, you know, under that. So when they start to talk about what they are feeling, what's happening for them in their lives on that subject, they will connect as human beings. If you bring the subject like that, oh, let's talk about the police, etc. Yeah, you have a problem. But if you talk, if you ask them, let's talk about how you feel about that.
And you have to say that because you're a psychologist.
Yeah, but you know, Lisa, we can work in the guidelines of this work. We can create a script, and it will function. It will happen wonderfully. I have seen that. I create this script, and we're using that, and it works very, very, very beautifully. You know.
Let me tell you one story because you'll appreciate this story. So here's a vignette. So I know a man in the state of Wyoming, and he is a victim of crime. He was a state trooper, So that he was law enforcement, state trooper is like police in a big state of Wyoming, which is very rural. He was pursuing a bank robber one day, got a call, and he was told, go after this guy. So when he found the suspect, he stopped, shot him, the state trooper, something like 8 times, one through the eye, and then he took bullets through his back. And he nearly bled to death inside his car. And later, I got an email that got directed to me from Prison Fellowship International. And actually somebody said, Lisa, we don't know what to do with this email we got from this man. And maybe you can respond. So it was from the state trooper. And he said to me, I have a story to tell. And I thought, and I'm checking it out. I thought, who is this? What is this? And he told me his story. He said, I was shot, almost died, and I have a story about how I forgave the man who shot me. And so I was astounded. At first I thought it was a fake email. I asked for some press clippings, articles about the story, and it was covered. So he's told his story through RJI and my previous nonprofit many, many times, because what happened was he told me that until that happened that day, when he arrested people or anybody that he was confronting as a possible criminal, he said, I hated them. He said, if I knew that they possibly had done wrong, he called them scum of the earth. So he had that kind of machismo as a law enforcement officer. But what happened is after he was shot, he said he went through this process where he hated the man who shot him, but then he was told by some of his spiritual advisors, in essence, his pastor, that he needed to forgive. And so he did. He forgave the man who shot him, and then he went in to visit him in prison, and then he wanted him out of prison. So I saw this huge transformation, and it was because of restorative justice. And so that's that story that it was like, I mean, that's a story of a cop. So it's astounding, and still is.
That's the power of the storytelling. That's the power of the restorative justice movement. And I truly believe that if we did some short series of these meetings, online meetings, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, and people let us show, spread the word and show their meetings, we can get their statements on that. It will be very powerful, because there are so many people out there who want to talk about that, but not going to streets and shout to everyone and etc. But they don't have they don't know where.
Right, to go, yeah. But at the same time, as we know, they want, and we want change. Change.
They can be part of the change. There are so many ways to be part of changing that.
Right.
There are layers and layers and layers that
Sure.
we can work on every one of them.
Yes.
You know?
Okay, and let me move on, because I know we got limited time, and you, Paulo, especially. Let's talk about COVID real quickly, where we are in our countries. And Paulo, do you have to leave pretty soon?
Oh.
You want to start?
Oh, as I start today talking with you about that. We are so bad right now. We didn't know what it would really happen from now on. We had no plan. We had no leadership on that. We are really in a bad place on that. We never know. We're not testing the people and etc. But besides that, and I said this in the previous meetings with you guys, we cannot trust the numbers. As we know, we haven't been had problems in the prisons with the COVID and etc. But we cannot trust these numbers, because we're not testing people. We're not, you know. There are places there are saying the numbers are higher to get money, to can use this stuff to make corruption, to it's unbelievable, but it's true. In the other places, the numbers really is very higher than we know. So the numbers in Brazil cannot be trusted. That's
Right.
it.
Is there,
The numbers are
Paulo, is
high.
there an opportunity, is there an opening for you to at least share the RJI recommendations that we put out? That you remember the press statement? I mean, is it helpful? Might it be?
Yeah, probably I had to translate it, because if you can send me the in a Word document, I can translate it and put in my media, social media again, because I put it in English, but you know, not everyone could read in English.
Okay.
So if you send me, I can translate it. I will give it back to you for you to see if it's okay, and we can release it in Portuguese.
And you know, it's not perfect. It's just a series of recommendations. Remember to encourage testing in prisons and jails, and to safely look at to look at the safe release of targeted offenders. And you know, I mean, that's something that still I don't know why I'm surprised. I'm not really, but the fact that as we know, prisons and jails are just low priority for any nation, which is dangerous, because those people are coming out, and the officers like us and STAC are working inside those facilities, and you know, you're spreading the virus. So others, Upneet, do you want to talk about India?
Now the cases are rising in India. We've had one state where Bombay, Mumbai, that is, you know, crossing about 80,000, but overall we have around 216,000. Testing is less in some states. It's
So
okay in the other
216,000
is a total across the country. So there are some states which don't have any. We have now the unlocking has started. We've had about 2 months of lockdown, which was extremely difficult for the migrants and the poor people. And now that they have gone back, so the rural areas, what we are apprehensive of, which don't have the medical facilities, may be hit hard. Once from the cities, they've gone back to their villages. So that's going to be of concern. But the major metropolitan like Delhi and Mumbai, they are the hardest hit. And hospital facilities out there, they're still able to cope. But if the numbers increase, then it is going to be scary. The death rate is still low. So the numbers are less. But we don't know. The preparedness has been okay only. It's not been too much. Testing is still, I mean, it has increased, but it still could do better. Prisons, yes, the testing is not a problem. Everybody now, I mean, the police arrest, so they have to get the person tested. So the police people who are arresting, they are more at risk in terms of getting the infections as compared to the prison officers. And I've addressed prison officers through a Zoom meeting, and we've done training on them on COVID-19, and just to see how well prepared they are. And I've had doctors address them to tell them about how to protect themselves. So there is no problem in terms of masks, in terms of sanitizer, soap. So that's the good bit of it, that infrastructure that is there and that's being manufactured. Prisoners themselves have been making masks.
right. And how about
a good practice in one of the prisons I got to know was that the officers, a team of 6 officers, they are going to each barrack to see whether the prisoners are using the mask and are actually maintaining the hygiene. So both the staff and the inmates, they form their own, you know, small committees to see that everything is in check. And there are some prisons which now they have kept, which are going to have just the new entries. So they're not going to be mixing up with the prison population, which is the previous prison population, so that the older ones, they don't get infected.
Right. And how about the recommendations of RJI? I think you mentioned before that I think you did share them in some place.
Yes, I shared them with the heads, and they have been well received. So they were similar also to what we had already told them. So they've been they find it helpful while working with the judiciary in terms of release on bail for the under trials, and for the ones who are to be 65 plus and all, women category, those persons. So they've been released on parole and premature release. So parole has been extended for another 6 weeks for the ones who have been convicts.
Okay. Okay. And Jonathan, about COVID?
Yeah. Yeah, in South Africa, in general, in terms of just the COVID-19 everywhere, up till the 4th of June yesterday, we had 40,792 new cases, and that was affected. But there is now 3,200 new cases. We've got, out of the 40,000 that is affected, 21,300 is fully recovered. And we've got, out of the 40,700, 848 deaths. Yeah. So the government is still very, very sensitive to the COVID-19. Just recently, because of our Disasters Act, the government could have this lockdown. But then the government worked in 5 levels. So level 5 was a complete lockdown for everybody to be at home. It was only essential workers that could go out and work, like police and correctional officials and medical staff. Then they brought it down to level 4 a month ago, and now we are in, from the 1st of June, in level 3, where there is a little bit more movement and a little bit more people that could go to work, but everybody that can still work from home were encouraged to work at home. Then there was an organization that took the government to court, and our High Court found that the government's decision on level 4 and level 3 was unconstitutional. So there is a dispute now. And now the government is going to appeal the High Court's decision, because they felt that they did the level from level 5 to level 3 now completely in accordance with the Constitution, but that will be challenged.
Is the argument freedom of movement?
Freedom of movement, freedom of movement. Yeah, freedom of movement. And it's just amazing that it is just, the whole concept is to make sure that we don't have more than 1,000 deaths. It's now already on 848 that out of a population of just about 55 million people. But they try to be sensitive to that. But I was reading yesterday in the news that when in the prisons, the prisoners is not rioting against the COVID-19. They're rioting against the cigarettes that was taken away from them, and rioting against the visits of their families that can't come and visit them.
Yes.
You see. So our prisons is still also closed. No one of us is allowed in the prisons. It's still closed because there are certain prisons, and especially our region is identified as a hotspot. And that's why Cape Town. And that is why many of the prisons is closed, because in some of the prisons, the COVID-19 is just increasing. And we've got over 600 people in prisons that's affected. Some of them are officials and some of them are prisoners. Yeah.
Right. Now,
So
have you shared the recommendations of RJI as well?
Yeah. They accepted the recommendations of RJI, and in the same time, you also put on through our colleague from Africa also the handbook of
Yes,
the
John
United
O'Malley.
Nations,
Yes,
and I shared both with them.
good.
And then that is where our president made the announcement that I told you on our last conversation, that they're going to release 19,000 prisoners over the next 10 weeks. But now the challenge is also, now that correctional services want to bring down also their overcrowding population, the community is not happy, because the community is saying, now you're throwing your problem to us. You see, so it seems to me that you won't be able to satisfy everybody, but the government was strong on this East people that qualify to even serve their sentence under correctional supervision than in a correctional center. So they were standing firm on that. They're going to release that people amidst the challenges of the community.
Right, or the use of restorative justice processes, as we've encouraged too, some kind of programming. So just from a U.S. perspective, as you know, as I'm sure you've been watching, we're not doing much of anything, I think, in response to COVID-19 in prisons and jails. I don't see it. I think if Jeffrey Deskovic was on the call from New York, he would agree with that, because even in places where the politicians are more progressive, they are very hesitant to focus their attention on prisons and jails. I mean, they're more concerned about the general population, which is surprising. So I actually shared our recommendations with a U.S. senator in my state, and I didn't get a response. No response. And she's a U.S. senator.
Is this about the COVID-19?
Yes, our recommendations.
What do you think why the United States is not is silent about COVID-19 in the prisons?
I frankly think it's two things. Again, I think it's that they're more preoccupied with responding to COVID in the general population, and they are more concerned about people that aren't incarcerated, the health of people that aren't incarcerated. And two things. One, we just like, who said this? I'm not sure, maybe Paulo. So there is no national plan. We have no national plan. As you can see, our president doesn't have a plan to respond to it. It's very inconsistent. So when we're talking about phases, we have phases, but those phases in response to COVID are state by state in the United States, and they're inconsistently applied. So it's a lack of leadership. But some states in the U.S. Have better plans, and they probably are testing their prisoners in custody. But I'm just not seeing it. It's not, and I think it's a lack of leadership. So I think it's important, just like I've said to all of you, we need to share those plans, and we can update that, the recommendations that we set down. We can add to them as you see fit, and to tweak it. But it's important because it at least shows that our body, RJI, and we have many members through this council and then through our affiliates, that we believe this is a wise way to respond to a public health crisis in our prisons and jails.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear your honesty on this. I can tell you now that I am extremely proud and excited about our South African government and our Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. I mean, they are really going out of their way to protect correctional officials and the offenders. They're really going out of their way. The minister himself goes into correctional facilities to go check on the process and to make sure that there is the COVID-19 regulations are adhered to. Very impressive, extremely impressive. And that is why they close the prisons and even keep the families away for now, and that is to protect everybody. So the way they were treating the South Africans in general, they do the same for those incarcerated and the correctional officials as well. And this is why I think I need to send you more details on the processes here, because we never thought that the American government can learn from the so-called third world countries.
That's right. That's right. And our president has made strong comments about your country and other countries. Yeah. Right. And let me say this, back up a little bit, because I don't want, since I might share this recording, I don't want to say that there's no states that have not responded in a, in a competent way, because the state of California, I think, is doing testing in facilities. I'm aware that there's a protocol, in terms of how to respond, especially when looking at the health of correctional officers. But it needs to be a much stronger response. And there's been an outbreak of the virus in many prisons and pretty much ignored when it's been reported. So yes, I mean, I totally agree. I think we can learn from other countries. So we humbly say that. I say it through RJI, that we have to find best practices sometimes outside of the United States. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So are we getting to the end? Do you have final comments?
Well, for me, I can say that as I always ponder on information that was shared in meetings like this, and sharing it with my wife and my colleagues and correctional officials, everybody is encouraged that we are not on an island. We're not fighting alone this pandemic. There are many challenges out in this world. And just by communicating to one another, it's a huge encouragement that we know that how we can learn from one another. And I can say to you, I learn from all of you, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. And we remember too, as this goes out, which I think I will share, people will hear about our position on restorative policing and how we're going to get that message out and hopefully convene other Zoom meetings and webinars, and then our continued position on COVID-19. So other comments, and then we'll close.
No, I'm okay. For me, that's
great learning and a great sharing. And I think another thing is that during the stressful time, it's a great support system to know, across the world, you have links and you have people who are there. So the RGI, it's a true family as such. So.
Right, excellent.
And I think from each other and sharing,
Thank you so much for being here today. And by the way, I think we will convene another one in 2 weeks, if that works for you. And I'm thinking of actually a Thursday on June 18th. I'm going to try to hopefully get Sandro Calvani on the call as well. But if the 18th works, on a Thursday instead of a Friday. So, but I'll be in touch about that. Okay? Good. Thank you all. Be well.
Lisa, just a question. Will a half an hour be helpful for others but it's too late in the evening if we start a half an hour earlier? How will that affect you?
Oh, me? Well, I'll be half asleep, but I can still moderate it. No.
Okay.
No, I think, the times are just hard, as Paulo said. I mean, Martin Howard, it was like 2 in the morning, so I think he wasn't able to join. He's done it in the past, but I know update your time is terrible as well.
So mine is okay compared to Martin's.
Okay, and then we'll just have to work on it. So we'll play with it and see what we can do. Try to get everybody involved. Okay, thank you so much. Be well.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.